How did this rich boy become one of the biggest memes in Formula One, causing accidents like this one, which nearly cost Fernando Alonso his life, and this other one that made Charles Leclerc retire from the race in a horrible way? These are the moments when Lance Stroll ruined Formula One.
Oh, he's in the gravel!
Since he arrived in Formula One, Lance Stroll has been one of the most controversial drivers in the sport. Unlike most drivers who had to prove themselves to secure a spot in Formula One, Stroll simply pays to race. Thanks to this, the driver has accumulated a series of accidents throughout his career, as well as many inconsistent performances and questionable decisions
At the head of it. Oh, that is ridiculous. That is a huge hit into the back.
that have hurt not only him, but also his entire team. And the worst part is, even after doing all of this repeatedly, his spot in Formula One is simply guaranteed. But how did Lance Stroll become the biggest meme in Formula One? Believe it or not, Stroll wasn't always this bad. In fact, he had a promising start to his career, with good results in karting and the lower categories. The problem is that this wasn't due to his own effort, but rather thanks to his family's money. His father, Lawrence Stroll, is a billionaire investor and spared no expense to ensure his son had the best equipment, coaches, and even a team practically built around him. To give you an idea, when Stroll joined Formula 3, Lawrence injected millions into the Prima team just to ensure his son had the best car on the grid and top-notch technical support. This led to Stroll winning the 2016 European F3 season with a huge advantage, but not because of his talent, and this became very evident the following year. And at the end of 2016, Williams, a historic team in Formula One, was facing serious financial problems, and unfortunately, the only solution they found was to accept a big check from the Stroll family and put Lance Stroll as a driver. That's when things really went downhill. Lance made his Formula One debut in 2017 at just 18 years old, becoming the second youngest driver to race in the category. But, contrary to what was expected from a young talent, his performances were disappointing. From his debut, it was clear that Stroll didn't have the same speed as other rookie drivers of the time, like Charles Leclerc and Esteban Ocon. He frequently found himself behind his teammate, the experienced Felipe Massa, and his lack of consistency on the track was evident. To give you an idea, early in the season he retired from 3 consecutive races due to accidents, all caused by him. In the Chinese Grand Prix, for example, he was involved in a collision with Sergio Perez right on the first lap, forcing him to retire from the race.
It's in the firing line if you go off in that corner.
As you can see, that wasn't his fault.
Fair old thump there, didn't he?
Shortly after, in Bahrain, he made an even more serious mistake. While battling for position with Carlos Sainz, Stroll simply didn't notice that the Spaniard was already alongside him and completely closed the door, resulting in a heavy crash that forced him to retire from the race.
It's me. Stroll hit me. He didn't see me coming in the inside.
As if that wasn't enough, in the Monaco Grand Prix, he had another crash that could have been avoided. This time, he missed the braking point and crashed into the barriers all by himself. This kind of mistake can be common among rookies, but the problem was that Stroll didn't seem to learn from them. Still, by a stroke of luck, he managed to secure a podium in the chaotic 2017 Azerbaijan Grand Prix, becoming one of the youngest drivers to reach the podium in his debut season. But that wasn't enough to convince the critics. That podium seemed much more like a stroke of luck than proof that he was talented. And what happened in 2018 made all of this even more evident. Williams, which had already been facing difficulties, produced one of the worst cars on the grid, and Stroll had even more trouble delivering good results. In fact, he performed so poorly that by the end of the year, it was certain he wouldn't stay with the team. But instead of having to fight for his spot in Formula One like any other driver, his father simply bought Force India for him to race. As a result, Stroll's spot in Formula One was secured again, but not without creating controversies. The thing is, he replaced Esteban Ocon, one of the most talented drivers of that time, who had been performing much better than Lance. From that point on, Formula One fans stopped seeing him as just an average driver and began to view him as a symbol of financial inequality within the sport. Not that money is the real issue. After all, Formula One has always had paying drivers. It's just that few have had their careers so blatantly influenced by money as Lance Stroll. Then, 2019 came, Force India became Racing Point, and now Lance Stroll was racing alongside Sergio Perez, one of the most underrated and consistent drivers in Formula One. This served as a real test to measure Stroll's level, because now, in addition to having a top-tier team, there was no longer any excuse that his car was bad. Yet, even so, the results were disappointing. Perez dominated the team's internal battle, outperforming Stroll in both qualifying and in races, and it wasn't a small difference. Throughout the 2019 season, Perez Perez beat Stroll in 18 of the 21 qualifying sessions. On average, Stroll was about half a second slower than the Mexican, which in Formula One is a huge gap. And to make things even worse, this was another season full of ridiculous moments. In the Spanish Grand Prix, he completely ignored Lando Norris being alongside him and forced a racing situation that didn't end well.
You can see this incident once again. Norris on the inside catches that right-left wheel of the Racing Point.
And in Canada, he made a mistake by trying to shut the door on Sergio Perez unnecessarily, risking yet another crash for the team. But the worst moment of 2019 came in the Japanese Grand Prix, when Stroll crashed by himself on the exit of Turn 2 during qualifying, wasting any chance of securing a good starting grid position.
Now, did he tangle with the Toro Rosso? So Pierre Gasly was the driver on the inside.
In the end, the 2019 season only served to prove that the team made a terrible choice prioritizing Stroll over Ocon. Despite that, the following year was possibly the best of Stroll's career in Formula One, although it was still full of mistakes. A good example of this was the Turkish Grand Prix, where he achieved his first pole position in wet track conditions.
Stroll crosses the line, and he does go pole.
Yes, boys! Let's go!
But as impressive as that may have been, Stroll managed to ruin it all. On race day, after leading a good portion of the race, he began to lose pace drastically and dropped to 9th place. His excuse was that the car had issues with the tyre. However, his teammate Perez managed the same tyres perfectly and finished in 2nd place. In the end, this only served to raise even more doubts about Stroll's ability to compete among the best. Additionally, 2020 was also marked by some of his most embarrassing moments. In the Portuguese Grand Prix, for example, he starred in one of the most ridiculous accidents of the year by simply ignoring Max Verstappen's presence and doing this. Later in the same season, during the Tucson Grand Prix, he had another crash after losing control of the car on his own.
Has had an off. Ooh, nothing he could do about that at all.
I got a puncher.
But it can still get worse. In the Imola Grand Prix, when entering the pits to change tyres, he braked too late and ran over one of his mechanics. After seeing all of this, it's easy to understand why so many people dislike Lance Stroll. If it were any other driver on the grid, this accumulation of mistakes would have already been enough to get them fired. But in his case, his spot has never even been in jeopardy. After all, his father now not only owned the team, but also had plans to turn it into something even bigger. At the end of 2020, Lawrence Stroll announced the restructuring of the team, which will be rebranded as Aston Martin for the following season, with a massive investment to make it competitive. And what was the result of that? Sergio Perez, who had carried the team in recent years and even won a race, was dropped to make way for Sebastian Vettel, while Stroll kept his seat with no effort at all. But even though Stroll's performance in 2020 was embarrassing, in 2021 he managed to be even worse. This time his teammate was a 4-time world champion, Sebastian Vettel. And as expected, the difference between the two became quite evident. While Vettel managed a podium and several solid performances throughout the year, Stroll remained in the background and became more known for his incidents than his results, like in the Azerbaijan Grand Prix, where Stroll had a major crash after a tyre burst.
Oh no, that is an accident, and it is Lance Stroll. And Lance Stroll, who might well have been coming into the pits.
But that's fine, there wasn't much to be done in that case. Although the Hungarian Grand Prix, his crash was completely avoidable. Right at the first corner, Stroll misjudged his braking terribly and simply destroyed the races of Charles Leclerc, taking both of them out of the race.
Dropped 3 or 4 places, and there's Lando Norris touched, and into each other goes Valtteri Bottas and Sergio Perez, and that's the Alfa Romeo, I think, has gone.
The crash was so foolish that he received an immediate penalty, and even the official broadcast highlighted how childish the mistake was.
Bottas took out both Red Bull cars.
Lance Stroll, just arriving far too quickly into the scene.
Later, when he was asked about the incident, his response was simply horrible.
Lance, really tricky conditions at the start. Just talk me through what happened.
Just challenging conditions, a lot going on, and it's just a shame. Yeah.
He downplayed the mistake and acted as if it was just a racing fluke instead of admitting that he had made a serious error. And in 2022, it was no different. In the Australian Grand Prix during qualifying, he ridiculously crashed into Nicholas Latifi in a scene that looked more like something out of a Formula One video game than real life, all because he didn't check his mirrors after exiting a corner. But perhaps one of the most embarrassing moments of the year was at the United States Grand Prix in Austin. During the race, Fernando Alonso attempted to overtake on the main straight, but Stroll made a late and completely irresponsible move, causing Alonso to literally take off and almost suffer a severe accident.
And Lance Stroll moves to the left to try and block Fernando Alonso.
You okay?
Yes, mate. Very late.
Fortunately, the Spanish driver was able to continue in the race, but that didn't stop Stroll from being heavily criticised afterward. After all, his lack of skill wasn't just ruining his own career, but also putting the lives of his competitors at risk. Despite all of this, the season ended and his seat was still secured. So, in 2023, he would have another chance to prove his worth, especially since this year, Aston Martin came in as one of the most competitive teams on the grid. In addition, now his teammate will be none other than Fernando Alonso, a two-time Formula One world champion. So if there was ever a moment for Stroll to progress, it was now. But as always, he failed. Right at the start of the season, he suffered a cycling accident that left him with broken wrists, affecting his performance in the first few races. Even so, he went out on the track despite not being 100% recovered. And while Alonso collected podiums and proved that Aston Martin had a strong car, Stroll often finished outside the top 10 and wasted valuable points for the team. As if the results weren't bad enough, the crashes continued. In Monaco, a circuit where any mistake can be fatal for the race, Stroll managed to crash twice in the same weekend. First during qualifying when he misjudged a corner and scraped the car against the wall, ruining his lap. Then in the race, Stroll made a completely pointless attempt to overtake Kevin Magnussen and ended up hitting the barrier. But the worst moment came in Singapore when he crashed heavily during qualifying and didn't even manage to race on Sunday.
Big crash on board with Lance Stroll. He was trying to wring the neck of the speed there and he finds the barrier.
What's most interesting though is that apparently Lance knows he's performing very poorly. So much so that at the Qatar Grand Prix, his frustration reached its limit. After being eliminated in Q1, the driver simply threw his steering wheel away and pushed his own personal trainer.
Canadian driver who's struggling to find the answers at the moment.
The incident left the entire team outraged, but the saddest part was the interview he gave right afterward.
Lance, we saw frustration from you on the TV screens. This obviously means so much to you. What are your emotions right now?
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry for the language there. What is not clicking for you behind the wheel at the moment?
I don't know.
Okay. And how does this change your mindset for the weekend? Is it now a test session? Are you going to go for it in the sprint?
Keep driving.
But one of the biggest proofs of Stroll's lack of skill came at the 2024 Brazilian Grand Prix when he ended up being booed. During the formation lap, when the drivers were simply heading to the grid, Stroll inexplicably lost control of his car and got stuck in the gravel, unable to start the race.
Crash. Try and restart.
You can reverse, you're going to have to come into the pit lane.
Oh, he's in the gravel.
So he's got it, he's managed to keep the engine going. He's tried to turn the car around and he's ended up in the gravel, and this will be an aborted start.
This moment was so surreal that even the commentators were left speechless. After all, how could a Formula One driver with years of experience make such a foolish mistake? It almost seems like his biggest opponent is himself. No wonder he ended up being booed. But this only serves to highlight what is by far Lance Stroll's biggest problem, his protection within the team. While other drivers have to constantly prove themselves to secure their place in Formula One, Stroll can make mistakes freely simply because his father owns the team. And if this doesn't change, he will continue to be a weak driver, making amateur mistakes despite having years of experience. But what about you? Do you think Lance Stroll can improve, or do you think he should have left Formula One a long time ago?